Hey, Mayor.
I do.
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fine.
Good afternoon, Colleen.
Hey, how are you?
Good. We're inside where it's cool.
I feel you.
Afternoon, everyone.
There's Judge Covington.
Ah, Joe
Hello.
Pat, I didn't recognize you.
Mayor, Joe Pat, how are you all?
Good.
Todd, we are well. How are you?
Well, I'm working, so I'm doing all right.
Good deal. It's your brother's birthday today. You didn't forget to call him, did you?
Oh, I poked at him on Facebook earlier today, so I think that's all the fun I'll have. I'll call him later though.
He needs plenty of votes.
Yes, he does.
Well, Todd, I know I appreciate you making the effort to be able to tune in with us. And you've got such a nice profile picture that we're getting to look at.
Well, I'm doing this, so I'm trying to avoid. I'm driving, and I'm trying to avoid looking at the screen. So that was just one thing. I said, you know what? I'll just do it that way.
Yeah, us and the people on the road with you probably appreciate that decision.
Probably so. Yeah, probably so. So, everything else going okay?
Mostly, yeah. Is that a real David Livingston, or is it just a box with his name on it?
It's a real David Livingston today.
Okay.
Live from work, home, or a softball field?
I'm home right now, trying to get everybody to be quiet.
I can understand that.
Colleen, is Chris going to join us?
Yeah, I think he's on. My fellow Madison Countyan.
Oh, I'm sorry. He's just listed as Madison County.
Yeah, he hasn't corrected. Hold on, let me make sure he's
All right.
not distracted. Hang
That's
tight.
all right. If he's on here, I think we're all here. Look at that beard Dean's got. Goodness.
I'll apologize for that now. So
Don't apologize. It's magnificent.
it's the Cova look.
Okay, guys, he's on. He's on. He said he didn't log in as himself. So, oh, there he is. Sorry about that.
Well, Mayor, who's leading this thing?
I was getting ready to ask the same thing, Judge. Who's leading this meeting?
Who's on first is what I want to know.
Exactly. We could probably pull that routine off right now.
I've reviewed the 7 pages of the proposed interlocal, and I need to share it with. I feel like I've shared it with Rand, but I just need to get his feedback. I've shared it with Rand, and I wanted to see if Alvin or Chad or David had any questions specifically that they had, and just that we could answer while we're all here together, and then anybody else that had any questions as well.
And it's possible, Judge, that since court's been involved in a meeting on the topic, they may be better informed than Tammy and Todd and David might be. So, but obviously we're talking about an interlocal agreement concerning the radio service and 911, and this potential agreement between Scott and Georgetown on one hand, and Madison County and the University of Kentucky Police Department as the third, I guess, thinking of it as a three-legged stool, Colleen, is that essentially correct? So just for my
Correct.
benefit, that's kind of the structure we're talking about. Just a brief history for David and Tammy and Todd's point of view. The group for a little while considered transferring the ownership and the location of one of the cores used in the system. And that has now been put aside. The cores will stay where they were originally intended to stay, including the two in Scott County. So that took away, I think, most of the concerns that anyone had about the regional cooperative framework. So this is our opportunity to hear from our friends in Madison County. We've got Dean Hart, our consultant from TUSA, on the call, so we can pose questions to him. The hope is, for the council members' point of view, is that if this interlocal committee can feel comfortable enough with everything that we discussed today and be in a position to make a recommendation to our respective legislative bodies. Court meets Friday of this week, city council meets Monday of next week. And the hope was we could get this conversation far enough along to where we could make positive recommendations to the court and the council. Is that pretty much what you expected, Judge?
Yes, sir. And the, we can do our first reading. I think we'd have to do 2 readings, I believe. And, it's just a regional radio network that will provide, it's going to be able to give us additional redundancy and the ability for first responders to use the same network from Sadieville to Madison County if needed. And from what I can understand, and Colleen and Chris, if you could correct me, there are no upfront expenses for Georgetown, Scott County. If there was, for some reason, a breakup and any party left the regional radio network, did still have a question about if we would have a ballpark on a cost and what that cost would go towards. I assume that it would have to go towards reconfiguring the technical side of the network, and maybe Dean could give us some ballpark thoughts about that as well. But it's very positive to have a regional radio network, and where we work through the issue of the cores. I think everybody feels very comfortable on our side about it. And Mike Hennigan, if you have any comments or questions, please share those too as well. Mike's kind of been our go-to on our, for Scott County EMA and Scott County first responders. So what questions does anyone else have?
Judge, Mayor, I have a question, and this is for the folks at Madison County. And understanding about the Bluegrass Regional Radio Service, part of that is that we'll be able to communicate with first responders in Madison County. My understanding is that right now, Madison County is not a part of the backups program, which the backups program allows the city of Georgetown and Scott County Sheriff's Office to have jurisdiction. Say it's a chase and it goes into a different county. That Scott County and the city of Georgetown would have jurisdiction in that county. And that's my concern. And I'll let the folks from Madison County address that issue.
Sure, I'm happy to take a stab at that. So the backups program is one that in Madison County, historically, the sheriff, which obviously, as you all know, in Madison County is its own elected official, and the Richmond Police Department under the direction of the commission and the Berea Police Department under the direction of Berea City Council have always had a historic concern because of Eastern Kentucky University criminal justice program being here, and the fact that at any given point there are 100 different law enforcement departments in Madison County going through training. Having said that, I know that Chief Monroe, who is our UK partner, has worked extensively with a counterpart in Berea. And it's my understanding that they are far more comfortable in participating in a backups program and is planning on doing so. As it relates to the Madison County Sheriff and the Richmond Police Department, that's a conversation that we have started with them. Obviously, we have no oversight ability with them, but that is something that we are going to continue to have a dialogue with them about as we look at the radio system and serving in some kind of capacity of the backup system. At the end of the day, unfortunately, we don't have direct oversight over that. And as that elected official, he would be the individual for the county making that decision. And that would be Sheriff Mike Cole and then the Richmond Police Department. So we're aware of it. We're working through those avenues. But at this point, they have opted at the moment to not participate in the backups. Until we had heard about the fiscal court meeting, we didn't realize that was really a concern of your all's. So we can speed up that discussion with them. We didn't see that as a component directly as it relates to this, but we can move that discussion along if that is something that you all would like to see. I don't know if that's helpful, if that's a thorough enough answer.
I just think it's important if we're going to be able to communicate with your first responders in Madison County. We also, if we're having to go in there for some kind of police activity, that there's jurisdiction, there's cooperation and agreement between both Madison County and the city of Richmond and the city of Georgetown and Scott County going forward.
Sure. I don't think that it is a cooperative issue. I think it's more of an Eastern Kentucky University criminal justice and having young individuals in training, but that is not my area of expertise. So I'll be happy to continue to push on that for you.
Thank you.
Okay. And Colleen, just so you'll understand, our very positive experience with backups, it actually generated from Chief of Police Mike Bossy in Georgetown. And Andrew Hartley wrote the interlocal agreement that created backups. And then Andrew worked with KLC to write the law that changed the interlocal sign-on agreement so that backups could be easily approved by other communities. The reason that Scott County can handle an event like 4C100 where we have 3,500 guests in from all over the country is because we use backups and put together 7 or 8 different police departments and sheriff forces just to work collaboratively. I think the concern is that with so many people at EKU, if you've got cowboy officers that want to do things in someone else's county, that backups is pretty strictly devised so that it's a collaborative thing. And you're right, you're not the jurisdiction that approves that, but it does have a bit of a history with Georgetown and Scott County.
Absolutely, I understand.
Chris, is there a ballpark or estimate if there was a breakup down the road, what an estimated cost would be and what those expenses would go towards?
We don't have an estimated cost as to what that would actually cost if there was a breakup, but since you're leaving your cores in the manner in which you are, and Dean, you can step in here and steer me the right direction. It would just be a matter of reconfiguring the databases. Whereas before, if you were opting to sell that core, there was a whole bunch of physical work that would have to be completed. So now in the manner in which we're doing this, it would just be some configuration that would have to be done. And Dean could probably provide us a fairly good number of what that would look like.
So we went through this same situation with the city of Miami, Miami Beach, and Hialeah. And Harris at the time gave them a cost to, it would effectively be reconfiguring the cores if they were separated. Harris gave them a cost of $250,000. So, on the light side, we say, once you make the marriage, divorce can be expensive, don't do it. Doing it with AMK, I would assume to be cheaper than corporate Harris. but that's the cost that they gave to those 3 municipalities in South Florida for what we're discussing now.
That's just software reconfiguration of the databases and stuff.
A lot of it's just administration fees and the actual unconnecting of the systems. So obviously, if in this configuration, Madison County is the premier core and then has the UAS, since Georgetown, Scott County already have that, and that's the database that all the radios are in. It's a unified archive server, something to that nature, UAS. Georgetown and Scott already have that, so it would be a point of reconfiguring that if the separation ever occurred, and then the physical separation of the network between the 2 cores, or 3 cores in this case.
Judge Covington, we could, AMK was already on board to give us a cost to get locked in for the purchase of another core and those services. I'm willing to go back to Greg at AMK and have them give us a locked in price to reconfigure those cores if there was a divorce, if that makes you guys comfortable.
I think it's something that would be wise for us to have a ballpark on, just going in. Nobody wants to go into an agreement thinking, well, always use the ifs and buts were candies and nuts. We'd all have a Merry Christmas. But, I don't want anything, I don't want something to happen down the road and then we be faced with this expense and nobody knew it was coming. I still think the positive outweighs the negative, and you've got just geographic protection, you've got the 911 backup, just the potential and long-term reduction in maintenance, hopefully, even though we've got that 15-year lock in. I still think that the plus is way out, definitely outweigh the negative. It'd be one of the only negatives that I can think of. So,
Judge, if I might, I am total agreement. When we laid this RFP out to buy this radio system for the county and the city, it was planned with a regional component in mind. There's so many upsides to regional radio systems throughout the U.S., just for interoperability with the first responders, as well as potential of shared costs. Unfortunately, we focus on the nits, and I get on the technical nits at times, but I think the good outweighs the bad. And I can sit there and say I've not seen any divorces through this. Typically, people work it out because they see the positive side of it and continue to march on.
Yeah.
This is David. I do have a question. With regards to private entity user, it gives a definition of any corporation, partnership, company, or nonprofit organization. Can I get some examples of what that exactly means?
Chris, do you want to take that one, or do you want me to?
You can if you want to, Colleen. I was just
Sure. I think that our feeling is that there's multiple layers of individuals who may come in with the desire to have radio systems. Obviously, here in Madison County, because of CSEP, we have a lot of users in the private sector that also utilize radios, such as Sherwin-Williams or other companies that have toxic related chemicals. They would have their own, and Chris would have to get me on the technical channel. They would operate on their own,
like their own bandwidth or something.
But they would be basically getting the benefit of the redundancy by coming on board. Correct.
Yeah,
so it's basically the ability to bring in more buying power.
Yeah, somebody like Lexington Airport, things like that are not your governmental agencies would be added in. And the beauty of that, paying into the radio systems, they get a reduced cost to have a radio system. And we get the benefit of having them on our system, which reduces the cost of our maintenance because they are paying into the system. So those are kind of what we figure as private entities. Probably the last people that we go after. The primary focus of the whole system is public safety for governmental agencies. That's where we'll start. And once the agreements are are signed and ready to go and everybody's in place, then we're going to go out and start trying to talk to these other agencies around the Bluegrass region and get them involved in this system as well. The more people that we have on, it for everybody person as we add those individuals.
Okay. My other question is Article 6 dividends, the remaining 60% of surplus funds after those first 3 years. How did you come to 27.5, and then 5% for Scott County, Georgetown?
Sure. The original agreement was an even split, third, a third, and a third. And that was based on, in essence, skin in the game. That agreement was the understanding that we would purchase the core with our CSEP dollars from Georgetown, and then we would use that core and relocate it. And so that gave you all a little bit more skin in the game because you ended up kind of taking a bit of the same risk that we were. We were all having to put something in. UK was providing the storage and some of the backup with their core. Obviously, we were upfronting the cash to be able to facilitate the project. When we met and the discussion happened that you were not interested in the core portion, that enables you all to divorce significantly easier than the rest of us. And so the question was raised, could we change the dividend structure to allow for those putting higher risk in versus lower risk to have a different proportion? And so that is how the percent dividend came about. So
you've got a breakdown of the percentage of dividend. How does it handle expenses? Are expenses just split 30, 30, 30, or not 30, or 33, 33, 33. How is that handled in this scenario? Because if if we're seeing a surplus and our dividend portion is 5%, not just with that, and that counts the city and county. So you can essentially say that the county gets 2.5%. How are expenses, if they arise, how are those going to be divided up?
Chris, do you want to take that question?
Yep, I can answer that one. So the whole system is designed around that each entity will continue to operate their radio system in the manner in which they do today. So Georgetown, Scott County is completely responsible for their 6 tower sites and all of the equipment that's associated with that. Madison County will be responsible for their cores and all their tower sites, and the University of Kentucky will be as well. What the hope is that the dividends that come back to you will help offset your costs that we're spending currently. So there should be no more added cost to you to be part of the BRRN as it sits today. You're already maintaining your 6 tower sites and your 2 cores and all the additional radios and stuff that you have with it. And so is Madison County and UK. The beauty is that when you do get that 5% dividend from the BRRN, if it ever comes to fruition, that'll help offset that cost that you're spending today for that 15 or 20-year maintenance agreement that you have. Does that help?
Yes, it explains it.
And I don't know that this ever got answered. I know Judge Coates answered it or asked it, and we kind of not beat around the bush, but just kind of got around. There are no upfront costs to the city of Georgetown, the University of Kentucky, or Scott County. All of the fees associated with upgrading the cores, providing the network connectivity, and all of those sorts of things are going to be paid for with these CSEP dollars to build this regional radio network. That's really why we're able to do this, is because of the CSEP dollars. We're taking that funding, and we decided that a regional approach to spend that money and help everybody was the best use of it, and that it really helps us down the line as well as everybody else. So all of those expenses will be paid for. There also is a shot that was put in from Georgetown to the University of Kentucky that I don't believe has been invoiced yet, and CSEP has agreed to pay that. I think it was about $120-something thousand that would be paid for by us as well to provide that connectivity for you.
And so when you all think about the divorce clause, you're going to upfront have a lot of the costs you would have incurred handled by CSEP to offset the potential of a divorce situation for you all.
I want to go back to that divorce cost issue just for a second. Here's here's my suggested way of how we address that issue in terms of the agreement. I think the first thing we need to do is establish the elements of what is involved in a divorce, what is involved in the reconfiguration from a technical, practical standpoint. Here's a bulleted list of all the things that have to happen in order for a divorce to happen in terms of the actual functioning of the network, and then set those forth in some meaningful way, whether it's in the agreement or in a, we contemplated a second agreement that would sort of spell out the operational aspects. And then I don't know that we have the ability, over the course of 20 years to have a set cost in the agreement. But if we have an understanding today of what it costs to do those 10, 30, whatever it is, elements, then we should have an understanding in 15 years of what that cost might look like. So have our agreement reflect the fact that here's not what it costs, but here is what has to happen in order for a breakup to happen. And then we can go into that agreement with full knowledge of what is involved. What was the other thing I was going to add?
Andrew, so let me just make sure I'm understanding what you're saying, right? You're saying we need to outline the items that would constitute a divorce as opposed to the cost of it, because that cost is going to be fluid essentially over the life of the agreement. Okay.
Right. And if it's 30 years from now and all of a sudden Georgetown says we want out, well, it's not going to cost $250,000 in 30 years. So I'm not going to get a guarantee from AMK or anybody over that lifetime. So I think what I'm saying is get AMK to tell us what does it cost today and what is involved in it, and set that forth in an agreement. So in 30 years, there is a defined set of parameters on what the person, any individual person leaving is responsible for. And maybe even give consideration to the idea of saying, we want to have this divorce cost in there to discourage folks from, dropping out of this in 6 months or 6 years. But maybe after 30 years, we have some amortization clause that says, look, after 30 years, everybody's on their own in terms of whatever the cost is. We'll split it 50-50 or what have you. But the idea of binding a government to some cost 30 years out sounds really impractical. Maybe there is some legal acknowledgement that has a shelf life to it. And after we hit that shelf life, sort of the chips fall where they may. How does that make you all feel?
I think that's a good idea, Andrew. Like you said, the cost is not going to be able to be pinpointed. When I referenced getting AMK to give you a dollar amount, be probably for 3 years, just to give you that safety and comforting feeling. If something were to happen in these first 3 years, you would know what that would cost. That's a good idea that maybe we include in the SOP is what that divorce looks like and the things that have to be taken care of in order to let that, and then speak about somehow that, after 20 years, because that 25 years is really the lifespan of a system like this anyways. And we can kind of nail down some language to make everybody feel a little more comfortable with that.
And the other thing that I wanted to add is there's a lot of these things that the way I see this process sort of from the top down is the interlocal agreement represents our sort of agreement to agree, if you will. We want to be by having the fiscal court, the city, the county, Madison County, UK approve all this. We're sort of approving the general container of this. But I think there's a whole lot of details that still work out. I mean, we really don't have, to my knowledge, we don't have a plan from AMK on how this will all work. But I think we can get through it. I think my point is to say, let's have our entering this agreement sort of be contingent upon us getting all of the details worked out, and then contemplate some kind of final reckoning, if you will, of, before any divorce clause kicks in or anything like that. Let's make sure everybody's okay with what the plan is and what the SOPs look like and all that stuff. There's no reason to hold up moving forward, but let's not set anything absolutely in stone until we have all of the little pieces worked out.
Yeah, and I think from our standpoint, Andrew, we can't spend any of that CSEP money until the agreements are signed and in place. And I think this interlocal kind of addresses what you spoke about. Let's all agree that we want to build this thing and let's do it. And once they're signed, then everybody can kind of appoint their own people to be part of this technical team to work with Dean and AMK and get all of the technical specifications written as to exactly how we do this. And then in the agreement already talks about the SOPs. And we all just need to be in agreements of what needs to be in that SOP and really find out those details, like you said, so that we all know exactly where everybody stands and exactly how this thing operates.
Yeah, and I guess my point is, if we sign the interlocal and we start the really detailed work and we get 2 months in and for some reason everything goes to pot and we say we want out, or anybody says they want out, there's really very little to undo at that point. So there's nothing to pay for. And I guess I'm saying that there's some acknowledgement of that in that a lot of the next step is planning and designing, and then there's a point we get to where we say, all right, we're committed, we're building this thing, we're hiring the contractors, we're doing all that work. Everybody that speak now or forever hold your peace.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's not necessarily spending money, but we can't do anything on our side until we at least have agreed by writing. And I think you're perfectly right. You get all those things lined out before we actually spend any money and commit anybody to have to be divorced. I think that's a perfectly good ask, that we go through this. We at least sign the agreement, go through all the technical details of exactly what we're doing, come back and get everybody to agree before we commit the funds to do anything.
That is,
And it seems like that would be, you have to do that to be fair to Madison County, because you all have to have a set plan before you apply for the actual CSEP money. So we can't give you something that is ill-defined. It's got to be as defined as we can possibly make it. And while I really appreciate the judges and your all's attention to what a divorce may look like, because we have to understand those things, I'd like to take just a minute and make sure that I understand well any of the things that might lead to a divorce. And the concept here is so simple, and it seems like it will work. So I look for where might the problems occur that could put us on the path to disagreeing. And I thought if we could talk for a minute about governance of this regional concept, just so we're all comfortable with the governance structure and the way things are done. In particular, I agree with that we each are responsible for our own radio networks and the cost of maintaining those. And we've built all that cost into our 15-year estimate and have a pretty good understanding of that. When I had a question concerning governance, if because we budgeted for upgrades or things that we're scheduled and Dean and his partners tell us that we need to be considering to stay as current as we intend to stay, would we in any way be restrained from doing that by the consortium not being ready to, or us having to delay an upgrade because UK wasn't ready, or Madison County wasn't ready. I'm just looking for possibilities where we could disagree, Colleen, and see if we can address those before the fact. Maybe we never see a divorce.
Yeah, Mayor, that's a great point. That is something that has to happen, and Dean would attest to this as well. If there is any upgrade done on a software version or anything like that, everybody has to participate. And part of the agreement was that everybody will be on the same FX contract so that all of those costs are already covered. And it really shouldn't be a money issue that, hey, Madison County doesn't want to do because they don't have the money. They should already have those contracts in place. So part of that SOP will require all of the entities to be on that same FX agreement and follow the same upgrade path. That's absolutely mandatory. For things that would cause us to divorce would be the conception of control. And a lot of the regional networks don't happen because people feel like they're losing control of their system, when in reality, they're not. Yes, the UAS gets transferred to one of the three entities to be the control of it, but that really doesn't mean anything other than that it's sitting at the University of Kentucky. Michael Hennigan and your people that run all your radio systems will still be able to log into those controllers and add radios, update radios, change encryption keys when they're based on just Scott County, Georgetown's radio system. Scott County, Georgetown can do anything they want to their radio system. The only time the BRR is involved is if that had a regional impact. If you were going to connect new users, if you were going to change encryption on talk groups that everybody talked into, those kinds of things would be the things that would be require the BRRN's committee approval. So that's what I see as the first one would be, like you said, the upgrades. We're going to address that by saying they all have to be in the same FX agreements and software upgrades. So that one should be addressed. Two would be the sense of loss of control, to where maybe the BRRN said you can't do this, but that's not really going to be a thing because you can do what you need to on your system as long as it doesn't affect the interlocal agreement with all of the cooperating agencies, which there's not many things you would do that. And Dean, feel free to jump in if I'm missing anything, but those would be the two big ones that would cause a divorce. And hopefully addressing the FX agreement would be number one.
So to Chris's point, Mayor, yes, the FX agreement, software and hardware is number one. Everybody's going to sign up to stay on the same sheet of music, as I call it. One of the concerns Chris brought up that was handled in the Miami area was Madison, in this case, will have what I call they're the primary core, the premier core. Typically in governance, every system, UK, Madison, Scott County, Georgetown, would have the rights as a super administrator to go into that core. The chances of that ever happening, technically, usually that's the AMK side that would be doing that on system configuration, but everybody at least has those administration rights to keep everybody honest, for lack of better words. Typically, to Chris's point, that's the control issue that once people are past that, and if the governance allows that, everybody's pretty happy.
Okay, good. So we can anticipate the problems that have led to divorces in other cases.
Absolutely.
This is our prenup, Mayor.
That's a good way of putting it, Colleen.
You know, the only other thing, Mayor, I could see, and I say this with respect, is if there's a change in political leadership, that could be a reason. But typically, at the point that these agreements have been made by previous leadership, nobody's ever looking at it really. It doesn't become an issue.
Yeah, and we're doing our best over here to try and learn how to do interlocals well. And this committee meeting is an example of that. Andrew, or Devin, what questions should we be asking on behalf of Georgetown that we haven't asked?
Well, I know Joe Pat mentioned sharing this with Rand. I've got all my comments from my first review are pretty minor. They're not really even worth group discussion. I just think they're pretty minor comments. I don't know who has the Word draft of this. I'd be glad to send any tracked edits or comments back to you all in Richmond. But I mean, I think everybody's hit the nail on the head. We got to get the interlocal in place. It's not the spot for the, tens of however many pages regarding technicalities. I mean, I've listened to these radio meetings. I've listened to Dean talk enough to know that an interlocal agreement is not the place for all those details. So I think it's generally a well-written interlocal, and I think it lays out what we need it to, and it gives us, it refers to those documents, those standard operating procedures, upon which the entire agreement and arrangement is contingent. So I don't know who has the Word document, but if you wouldn't mind circulating that would be great.
We can do that for you. That's no problem.
Devin, I didn't get to bring you in the loop, but in our previous conversation, we talked about making sure that all the technical elements of the Local Cooperation Act were there. And I had thought that maybe there needed to be a few little tweaks. And Colleen acknowledged the fact that while this has already been approved by Madison County Fiscal Court, there's room for minor technical changes that don't affect substance.
Right. And nothing I saw was substantive. So I don't think any recommended changes or additions would require fiscal court to reconsider it.
My copy does not have a signature page.
One of the things that I was referring to is this just there's no signature blocks or dates or approvals of various agencies. And I don't think it needs that because that's all set by the law. We could just add that stuff as an end page or whatever. But
Right. We approve ours as an ordinance. The actual document that goes to file at the Attorney General's office would have signature pages. We just weren't sure who to add for you all. So just let us know on that and we can do that when the time comes to send that.
Right. And that's one edit I was going to make. You have us listed as Georgetown / Scott County, but I'll probably lay everything out. City of Georgetown, Scott County Fiscal Court, just kind of separate us in that sense since both bodies will approve it. But like I said, nothing substantive on my end.
Does the interlocal committee need to formally make a recommendation to both bodies?
I'll make a motion that we accept it or however we need to word it.
Is there a second?
Tough crowd, George.
I know it. Chad Wallace is shaking around in his seat.
Judge, I'll give it to you. This is David Livingston.
I hear a second from the Honorable David Livingston. Is there any other questions or comments?
This is Alvin. I do have one question before we move on. We're talking about things that could lead to wanting to divorce the thing. And it's kind of technical. Is there any possibility that you mentioned a lot of the private entities that could come on, especially Madison County to add? Is there any possibility that it would fill up the system so much that it would restrict traffic, the use by the individual counties? That would be my concern. Is there a limit on how many users can get on here and still have it effective?
I'll let Dean answer that specifically, but to my knowledge, can handle lots and lots of. What's the number of subscriber units it can handle?
Yeah, so the city of Georgetown, Scott County have 10 channels today. That's 18 talk paths in the technology. And there's room that they could add a total of 20 channels. So that if you fill it up, your county is going to now be an urban county. It's not going to be a rural county. So it's a great question, but capacity was built in. Each system owner would be responsible to make sure that they did not have a capacity issue on their respective networks.
just for everybody's benefit, Robert Swanigan just joined us. Hey, Robert.
I think the committee provides that mechanism too. It's pretty generic language, but essentially that committee would be tasked with accepting or rejecting new parties to the network. So I think it's good that voting power is there and everybody can advocate if they have concerns about a specific user or at some point capacity. But like you said,
another just as an example, the Kansas City area network, if state or federal or other local or even private want to come on their network, part of their governance makes them come in and do a formal request to the committee. And then the committee will take that back to some technical level and operational level that will come back with a recommendation to the overall committee for approval. So that's kind of the governance process.
Yeah, thank you, Alvin. That we can't have one of the partners dominating the use, and your question highlights that we're protected from that.
I have a question for Dean. This is Tammy. You mentioned the breakup, the divorce in South Florida. What was the reason for that? Can you share that?
Oh, no, they did not break up, but they had that clause in their governance and in their interlocal. They call it an MOU in South Florida. No, they did not break up, but they asked the same questions that you guys have asked. What is the steps and what is the known cost today, knowing that could be fluid throughout a 10 to 15 to 20 year project. So no, that I have not seen any regional systems that have done this ever break up. They put the governance in place. They have cooperation between all the agencies and especially the people that kind of were the frontier to make it happen. And it just works after that. But you always got to have that termination clause just in case.
Thank you.
Let's vote.
Any other questions or comments? Mayor? We've got a motion from the Honorable Todd Stone and a second from Mr. David Livingston. So,
And in hearing no further questions, Judge.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I believe that motion passes. Any other comments or questions? I think that's all we had on the agenda. Is that correct, Andrew?
There's a general discussion item on there. If anybody wants to, bring anything up, we can't vote on any other stuff, obviously, but there is a general information, general questions section. If anybody has questions about the interlocals themselves or the topics that are covered thereby.
Andrew, before we completely sign off the radio thing, I'd like to thank our friends from Madison County for your work on this.
Absolutely.
And in particular, your patience with all the questions and the pushback over the core and all those various things. But in working with Dean and the city and the county, find a way to get this stuff to work. So thank you all for the way you've worked with us. I anticipate the rest of it will be done in the same spirit.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And on behalf of Madison County and for Judge Taylor, who could be on the call today, we just appreciate your all's willingness and openness to reach out and maybe expand the possibility and provide some savings for our constituents in the future. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mayor.
I guess there's, unless you all want to hang out and watch us talk about the rest of our interlocals, there's no reason for you all to stay on. Dean, you too.
As my sixth Zoom call of the day, I'll pass on that option. So thank you.
Good to see you all. Be careful. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do we have any other items to discuss?
I had one item. The last time that we met before the pandemic, there was a movement that we were going to look at planning and zoning and do a review over planning and zoning, as well as we were going to do a water supply issue study with the water company. I believe that was both joint with the county. Can Judge or Mayor update me on where we're at with that?
Sure. Judge, I'll be glad to take a stab at it, and then you can correct me when I'm wrong.
Go
First
ahead,
off,
Mayor.
the planning and zoning effort, Chad, is something that we still need to do. And I think that's both a review of our zoning ordinance and a review of our subdivision regulations. Massive projects that will require probably we're guessing an outside consultant at considerable expense to go through that. And a really heavy lift that we just thought that with the virus and our budget concerns that we still need to do it, but we haven't been real aggressive about chomping onto it at that time, or at this time. So that's still on our to-do list, but not something we've moved very far. We've made much progress with. So Lucy, you mentioned two. What was the second one?
The water study, the water supply study. I assume with the drought, we're probably going to be getting lots of complaints soon about water.
Yeah, I believe that Chase is working through. Judge, weren't they working through the selection of a consultant for that?
I believe that to be the case. And he had shared, you and I had both spoken with him, and he had shared some, just some general approaches that could be looked at he had to narrow the scope of work. That's the best way to say it. Would you agree with that? They wanted to narrow the scope of work and there was a wide range of options, and the mayor and I shared it was a Zoom, I believe, and tried to kind of walk through that with them. And I think they were trying to narrow it down and get it to a point where they could proceed. They'd done a lot of work on it.
Chad, what's interesting is that their calculations already show us that us building a Scott County reservoir may not be the solution. That its capacity may not be great enough to be worth the investment that we might make in another direction that gives us a more sustainable supply of water. So he was looking at we put everything on the table, getting to the Ohio River with the pipe, getting to the Kentucky River, and then trying to understand which ones are even reasonable enough to study enough to get a cost and which ones are just silly to even think about. So some of that work in a preliminary step has been done. And it may be, Judge, that if Chase has gotten any more information, that the presentation that you and I went through might be of value to this group.
No, I would agree. I thought it was very interesting. And, you look at our growth and I think it's evident that the Kentucky River is susceptible to drought issues. Whereas, the Ohio River, if it becomes an issue due to a drought there, then we're all in big trouble. And they even presented an option there with possibly connecting. From my recall, there's a pipe that's gone all the way to Shelbyville down 64, and the possibility of looking at a connection to that, would supply our community into many, many, many years into the future. So
the only inexhaustible supply around here is the Ohio, and it's considered to be an inexhaustible supply of water for us. The river has proven to us several years in a row that it doesn't go dry, but the pools stop and get stagnant. And that's when we have the odor complaints and the treatment difficulties, is when the pools get still and stagnant. So big, giant questions, Jay. It's kind of fascinating.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anything else, anyone?
Thanks for everybody responding so quickly and coming on short notice.
Yeah, we definitely set a record for an interlocal committee meeting about getting it together this quickly and actually having a firm report for both the council and the court. So that's pretty good.
No, much appreciated.
Judge, we've got another Zoom at 6 o'clock. Is that right?
You are correct, Mayor.
That one may last a while.
Yeah. You want to share what we're working on, just with the group?
Yeah, Judge and I there's been so much energy and passion released in the community over racial issues and difficulties and things that need to be addressed. And so many groups were coming to the judge and myself and asking for meetings with the fiscal court, meetings with the city council, and community meetings and dialogue and marches. Judge and I got together and we're now working directly with the NAACP. John Douglas and Alonzo Allen are working with the judge and myself. We've got a pretty good list of groups that want to be involved, and John's taken responsibility for inviting 2 representatives from each of those groups to Zoom planning meetings. We met 2 weeks ago, and the group approved a structure on how we would move forward with some community conversations, a committee structure to bring issues forward, and how to get it to a core committee at some end point. And for the last 2 weeks, all of those groups have been working with their members to talk about which issues should be prioritized as they give this thing some structure and form. So tonight is when everybody does their report back on their last 2 weeks' work and see if we can agree on a set of issues that we as a community want to discuss. And Judge and I have promised that we'll use our officers not to get in front of these folks, but to stand up with them and try and get it done.
I think it'll be a positive outcome, and will be a good step in the right direction.
A lot of energy, just boy, it needs to be channeled in one direction.
Yeah,
That's what we're really seeing. And we thought that the best thing we could do is see if we could help folks point in one direction rather than all over the place.
Well, I'll see you at 6, Mayor.
That's all I got, Judge.
That's all I've got.